Hello and welcome to this series of tutorials on Django. Django is one of the most popular Python web frameworks that people use for full stack applications. Now, I am going to show you how to use Django to build great websites that people can sign up, log in, add comments or reviews, and you can moderate those. Now, in each episode, I'm going to introduce something or a project that would start from very small to much more advanced projects. In this episode, we are going to build something like this with, well, you will have your admin dashboard. You can log in there and you will add some posts and it will appear on the screen like this. And the styling comes from Bootstrap. So you'll have a poem title, author, some text, and if people click on the link, they will go to a full text of that review. So this is what we'll make. And I highly suggest that you go to Django project documentation to take a look at what it is, how things work. They also have some tutorials there as well. Now I'm going to use Visual Studio Code as my editor, although my favorite is PyCharm, but for whatever reason I'm going to use this one now. And I'm also using AWS Code Whisperer that auto-suggests code for me. I have a tutorial on how to use this and how to activate it. It's for free, so it makes things much easier and faster. Now I have this folder, Django-books, which is empty. The first thing I'm going to do, I'm going to create a new terminal, and I want to create a virtual environment. The idea is what happens in Vegas stays in Vegas. So what happens in a virtual environment stays in a virtual environment. So whatever packages you install here, they will not affect other programs on your machine. So it's great to have a virtual environment. How do we create it? I'm inside this folder. I use this command python -m venv for virtual environment, and I give it a name. I'm just going to give it the same name, venv. And if I press enter, you see this folder has been created. Inside the folder, there are some others, like scripts with uppercase S, and inside there is an activate file. So we need to activate this environment. So still, we do not have it. To activate it, we go to the folder, venv, uppercase scripts, and activate file. So now you should have this venv next to your path. If you have it, it means you are inside a virtual environment. So whatever you install will stay here. What do we need to install? Django. What is the command? Pip install Django. Press enter. Django will be installed in this directory. And the first thing we do is to start a project in Django. A project is basically like a whole website that you have. So the command for that, I'm going to make it a bit bigger here. And let's just wait. So the latest version of Django is 4.2 for now. It's been installed. Everything looks good. Now we need to start a project. The command we use here is Django-admin and start project, one word, and give it a name. I'm going to call it poems project, and then add a dot at the end. The dot tells Django that you should not create an additional folder for me. Just create the project right in this folder here. So now press enter, and you should see a folder and a file. The folder contains a lot of these files I will talk about, and the file is manage.py. This is a very important file. You should not change it. We will use this a lot in the command line to create things, to run servers, about databases and all that. To make sure everything worked, right down below here in the terminal, use this command, python manage.py, the file that I just told you about, and run server, one word. Press enter, and you will see a minor error here. Is fine, we'll deal with it. But down below, starting development server at this address. So you can control click on it or just copy it. And I have it here, so I'm going to refresh. And if you see this, everything went well. Okay, you have installed Django successfully. Perfect. What else? Let's deal with this. So here it says you have 18 unapplied migrations because you've just installed everything here. There are things that need to be updated. So what you do is you run this command. But first you need to stop the server by pressing Control C, and it stops server. Now you just need to put this command right here, python manage.py migrate. Now press enter and all is good. Okay, now we also have an SQLite database created here. So this is by default the database that Django uses for development, for making these apps. But when you want to put them online, deploy them, you need to use a better or production level database like Postgres or MySQL. But this works for now. Now let's go inside this poems project to see what we have. Well, we have a cache here, we have init file which tells Python this is a package, several modules. Then you have ASCII and WSGI, or ASGI, asynchronous, and you have WSGI. So these basically serve your web pages. We do not deal with them. But these two are very important, settings and urls.py. Let's go to settings to see what we deal with here. So settings, I'm going to remove this old comment here. We have a path and we have a base directory. So first we need to see where we start from. So that's why you need a base directory to kind of direct, to have a reference where each file is relative to this base directory. So the base directory is the parent of the parent. So this is the parent setting, and this is the parent of the parent. So basically this is the base directory. Then you have a secret key. You should keep secret when you want to deploy your website online. You have debug set to true, meaning if something happens, if there's an error, a spelling error, a command error, something does not exist, it will give you, Django will give you very detailed error messages, where to find the error. But when you want to deploy your website online for other people to see, you need to set this to false. You don't want others to see all these detailed errors. This one is for also online, putting it online. And here, app, the concept of app is very important in Django. So apps are basically sections of your website that can stand on themselves. For example, you have a website, and that website can have a blog section, an e-commerce section that you might sell stuff there, a members section that members interact there. So all these sections can be different apps in Django. So you want to break your website down into these components or apps so that if something goes wrong in the e-commerce part, you know where to find the error. Then this is also not something that we do deal with in this episode, but this one, templates, is very important. So templates can refer to, for example, your HTML files. You have a home page, home.html or index.html or about.html. Where should Django find them? Where are they? Well, you should specify that in this directory. We can specify it right now actually. So I'm going to create a template folder right in the base directory here. So press this one and just type in templates. So this is the place that I will save my HTML files. Now that I've done this, I need to tell Django where these templates should be found. Remember, it's in the base directory. It's in the templates folder. So base dir that we defined / templates folder. So it's right here. It's not inside the poems project. It's in the base directory. Okay, then we have WSGI databases. I said is SQLite by default. Then you have time zone and place. You can change them. And this is the issue we will deal with later, like static files. So for Django and for most project, web frameworks, Files such as style sheets, JavaScript, or images are called static files, and they are rendered and treated differently. So we are not going to deal with this in our project for now. So let's just save this settings.py. And I talked to you about apps, and apps are sections of a website. So I'm going to create one app now, and that app is just going to be called Poems, so that we know this only deals with poems. So let's create the app. How do we create that? Python manage.py start app, one word, and let's just give it a name of Poems. And I press enter, and now you see I have another folder here. And if you check this folder, Poems and Poem Project, you see they're totally different except this init file. So in this Poems, I have migrations, and that deals with the database or tables. Then you have admin.py, it's for my admin page. Then you have apps.py, which configures the Poems app that I just created. Models, which is about tables in a database. For example, the name of the author, the poem, the dates, how should I save them. Then this is for testing purposes, and this views file, which is a collection of functions, sometimes classes, but basically a collection of functions that you use to put things on display for the view, for the HTML pages. So now that we've created this app, we need to inform Django in the settings folder file that we have created this app. So we need to put it here, right under the installed apps. We need to set this poem. So now Django knows that yes, there's an app called Poems. So we've introduced this Poems to Django. Great. Okay, now how do we know where to go and what to find? If someone goes to our website.com, what should we show them? So let's see. Inside the views, so views are responsible for those logic things. That is what should be shown to people. So inside the Poems app, there is a views file. Inside that, let's define a function called index. You can call it whatever you want. I'm just going to call it index def, well, home. Okay, let's just call it home. Amazon suggested that one, so I'm not going to change it. So we have defined a function called home. And this takes an HTTP request, and what it returns is it renders the HTTP response and the home page, a home.html. So what it does, basically, what this function does, it returns home.html. So we don't have this home.html yet. So let's create it inside our templates. Home.html, and not like this, home.html, and I'm going to create a boilerplate by exclamation mark, press tab, and let's just say home page and some dots. That's it. But this doesn't make it appear on the website. If I go there, nothing happens. Why? Because I still don't know that this should be returned when someone goes to the home page. That's why I need to go to the URLs in my Poems project, URLs, and here, let's get rid of all these, and here inside the URL patterns, I should specify that when someone goes to this path, what should happen. So let's say path, and okay. So when someone goes to this path, this is like basically regular expressions. So this path, there is nothing. That is website.com. So web, I don't know, whatever your website is, .com, for example. That's it. When someone goes there to the root directory of your website, and not -about, for example, not that, something should be returned. And what is it that should be returned? I want this function, which includes this HTML to be returned. This function is inside the views file, which is inside the Poems folder. So I should specify that here. I should say from poems. Let's see if it, come on, Amazon. From poems, import views. So we imported this views, and right here, I mentioned that views dot index, or home actually. The name of the function was home, right? So the name of the function was home, which is inside. Yes, it's home. So I'm returning this function inside the views, and I'm going to give it a name called home. It's not obligatory, but it is best if you do, because later we'll use this name a lot. So now, whenever someone goes to this directory, that is the root directory, this function will be returned, and this function contains this HTML page. Okay, now that is good. Let's run the server and let's see what happens. There is no error here. Great. So let's just refresh, and the HTML page is rendered. Home page. Perfect. Okay, now that we have this, now what I want to do is, let's go to the homepage here. What I want to do is I want to have something, let's say like a card, where in that card I have, for example, the poem title, and then I have, let's say, H6 poem author, and I have a small tag like a date, create a date, and I have the poem text itself here. So I want these to be shown there. So now I want these to come from a database, from the admin dashboard. You should type in things there, and it should appear here. How do I do that? Well, I need to, let me close this off for now, and this as well. What I need is, I need to go to the models inside my app, Poems app. And here is the place you define those fields. So let's also Control C, stop server. So here is the place you define like a table that you'd specify. I want an author, a text, date, things like that. So for that, I need to create a class, and the class, well, it's not going to be contact. Let's just call it poem, and this will change to poems in our database. But so we have a class of poem, which is subclassing or inheriting from the models. And down here we need to specify these fields. So these fields, thank you Amazon, one of them is title, and the title is going to be taken the models dot char field, that's character field, which is kind of like short text basically, something like an input field in HTML. And the maximum length of that field is going to be 100. I think that's enough for a title of a poem. Then we have the content. Yeah, let's keep it at content. It's going to be a text field. So text field are something like text area in HTML. They're much bigger. What about an author? So actually let's have an author as well. An author is going to be also a character field, and yeah, 100 characters should be enough for the name of a person. And updated, we don't need updated, so we only need created at, which will have a date time field. And so if you see we have a date field, maybe date field should be enough. We don't need a time. And then auto underscore now underscore add equals true, meaning just add whatever date it is that we insert this data there. So I'm going to delete this one for now, but you will use it later, so you'll see why. So we have created this this poem database or table basically. Now how can we use this? So if we go to the server, if you run the server again in the terminal, python manage.py run server, and if you go back, if you go to admin panel here, you see a username and a password. So we don't have any username and password yet, so we need to create it. So to create those, let's Control C, get rid of that. We need to use this command, python manage.py create super user. So it asks you to give it its username. I'm going to call it admin. Email, I don't want to give it an admin email, so just press enter. Password, password. It says it's too short. Do you want to use it? Yes, I want to use that. And that's it. Super user created successfully. Now let's run the server again by python manage.py run server. And now this time, if you go here and press refresh, you can go to your Django administration. Perfect. But wait, where is this poem thing that we created? How can I insert poems there? Well, for now, it's not registered in the admin. So what you need to do, you need to register this inside your admin area, admin file inside the poems. So right here, first I'm going to import it from the models, which is inside the same directory, and I'm going to import, well, not everything, maybe poem, because it's just poem there. So now that I've imported that, I'm going to add it or register that poem by admin.site.register poem that we imported. So now I have registered this poem here. Then the last thing I need to do, because when you create a model for database, you need to prepare those changes and update those changes in your terminal. So the command for that is python manage.py make migrations. So you need to make migrations, that is, prepare those changes for updates. So you make migrations first, and it says migrations for poems. This model has been created, so you can see that there are some changes. Okay, perfect. Now the next step is to apply those changes by python manage.py migrate. Now you need to migrate those changes, and it says, oh yes, there's a misspelling here, manage.py migrate, and now it's all good, everything okay. So now I'm run the server again. So manage.py run server, and everything looks good. I go back, and if I refresh, I should see poems here. And you see it's poems, not poem, because we created poem. So Django just adds an S itself. Sometimes it's awkward if you have, for example, I don't know, you create poems, then you will see two S's there. But anyways, so now we have this poems. We can add a new poem. So let's just go there, and you can add it here. And you can see we have a title, author, and content. So let's add title. I'm going to call the first one like humanity, John Donne, no man is an island entire of itself, blah blah. Now let's save this one, and let's create another poem called I don't know, Wind, maybe. Robert Frost. The rain to the wind said, you push an aisle, whatever. So now I'm going to save this as well, and now you see I have these two, but the look is not very useful and readable. Poem object 1 and 2, what are these? Instead of this poem object 1 or 2, I want the title to represent this object. So the way you do it is you go to the models, and down here you use a string representation of that, which returns the title of this. So now what we get is the string of this title used there. So what you can do is now you can also make migrations here, and it says no changes detected, so you don't need to do that. Now let's go back, refresh. Well, actually we need to run the server. So run your server here and go back, and you can see here now we have wind and humanity. That is, the title is instead of Python object 1 or 2. Awesome. Okay, now how to display these? So let's say I add a poem in my dashboard. I want to display it on the web page here. I want to display it here. How do I do that? Well, that's also a very good question. So you need to go to the views of your poems, your app, and make this models available for this HTML page. How do you do that? You say from dot models import, well, poem, not post. So you're importing poem from, that you're importing poem from the models, which is in the same directory. And now that we have imported that, we need to tell our function, which is responsible for this page, to do these things. So we say create a variable called poems, and the poems is going to be the poem table, and grab all the objects in the poem table. And all the objects are object 1, object 2, object 3, you saw them. Now, you save them inside this poems. And then we create a context for these variables, like as a dictionary. So now we have poems, and which you could call this whatever you want, but this one basically is the objects that you get from your database. So now we can use this context inside our HTML by passing it here in the render function here. So now the context, which includes poems, is available to your HTML page. So basically you have access to poems of title, poems, dates, and all that. So you see title, author, content, and created at. Okay, now that we have access to those inside our HTML, let's go to the home.html, and instead of this, we should have the title, we should have the author, we should have the created at, and we should have the content, right? Great. So the thing is, since we have several of those objects, we need to go through them one by one, that is using a for loop. So then, in order to have a for loop in Django, use a template language, what Django gives you, and that is going to be a pair of curly braces and 2 percentage signs. This means inside here, I'm going to, this tells Django that, okay, I know this is an HTML page, but I'm going to use some Python expressions here, like if statements or for loops. I can use them right inside these. So I would say for poem, or I or X, whatever, in poems. And remember, this poems is what we got from the views from the context, which is poems. We have access to it. So for poem in poems, and remember, you need to end this for loop somewhere, because you can't just leave it open like that. And I want to end it here after the card. So I want cards to be created for every poem. To end this, well, the same way that we created one, we use end for, as in one word. Okay, now we have access to every poem. So how do we insert the values? So to insert the values in Django, that is variables, you use double curly braces. So we use percentage and curly braces for expressions like for loops or for if statements, and we use double curly braces for values or variables. What is the variable value that we are going to use? The poem that we just are looping through, dot title. And remember, because in the models we have title, we have author, content, right? So poem.title is here. Next, let's have poem.author. Here, let's have poem.created at. That was for the date. And here we're going to have poem.content, right? So remember, they should correspond these. Okay, now we create this for every card and we end the for loop. Let's also have an HR, like a line tag, after each card to separate them. Now that I've done that, the server is running. If it's not for you, just python manage.py run server. And let's go back, and here I'm going to refresh. And look at this, humanity, John Donne, date, poem, another one. So all will appear just like that. Isn't this awesome? Now, the styling is terrible. So what we do, I'm going to go to this thing here. And if you want the styles, just let me know in the comments down below and I will give it to you. So I'm going to, in the head, I'm going to copy the links to Bootstrap, CSS and also JavaScript. And let's go back, and inside the head, right above the title, I'm going to paste these, but these scripts, these JavaScripts, these 3 lines, I'm going to put at the end, at the bottom of the page, and I just keep the style sheet, that is this style sheet, here inside the, inside the head tag. Okay, now the body, let's also deal with this. I'm going to copy everything. And since I want to keep, well, let's just get rid of everything and we'll do them again. So inside the body tag, right above this script, so you delete everything here. So there is body, and you paste everything here. And if I save this and if I go back, you should see the changes. You can see everything has changed. Now we need to put in the title and everything there. So where do I do that? I should do it, I should do it right after this row and here. So I'm going to create this column over and over just because this is a card. So I'm going to use the for loop here again for poem in poems, and then let's just end it in the poem and the loop here. So end for, and then replace these poem title, remember, with double curly braces for the values poem dot title. And let's just copy this part here, and I'm going to add this one for poem author, this one here for for poem dot content, I guess, yes, content. And I don't have a date here, so let's just add the date as well, maybe in small. It was called created at, right? And yeah, these things do not go anywhere yet, these cards, so we will deal with them later in a later video. So now let's just go back and see if everything is good, and yes, look at this, awesome. And it's also responsive, so we can see this on a mobile view. Perfect, works, awesome. Okay, so that is something that on a tablet, yeah, so everything is good. So now we have managed to add things from the database, from our dashboard here, and you can also delete things if you want to, so, or edit them. If I go to admin in the poems, I can simply go to the wind and I can add edited here and save this and go back, and you can see edited here, I've been added. So this is something that we just built today, and this episode will continue to add another page to it. When someone goes to card link, it will show a whole text field with everything there, and we'll build on from there. I hope you liked the video. Let me know if you did, and if you have any questions. Thank you very much for watching and listening.